All right. Good morning. Good Wednesday morning to everyone. Today is July 2nd. And of course, we have the 4th of July here in the United States coming up here on Friday. And, I've been having a lot of people say to me, geez, what's going to happen? Is the Iranians going to attack? The Klingons going to come in and, or we're going to have to put up the shields, all that stuff. Um, I kind of get that there may be disruption. I actually cast a chart on that, but I don't think it's going to be catastrophic. And I think what we're seeing here is, again, law enforcement's starting to get a lot more on it. And not that stuff can't happen, but I'm a little bit more worried about weather. We've got Uranus actually being conjuncted by Venus, or I should say Venus conjuncting Uranus right on Friday. And that's powerful. And that could definitely cause a little disruption and weird stuff. But I would tend to say I don't see anything major and catastrophic. I also had a couple of people who are intuitives and psychics tell me they've had dreams of huge earthquakes over in the Pacific area of Japan or somewhere in Southeast Asia, and that huge tsunamis could be coming towards Hawaii and such. Again, that's possible. I mean, Uranus has always been associated with earthquakes, and I've noticed that. Usually we have some hard aspect going on with Uranus, but this is a Venus-Uranus conjunction, which doesn't strike me as something that would be catastrophic. So we'll see what happens. But I'm not getting no. I'm in fact, let me look at that one more time. I actually just cast a chart on that before I got on here this morning and said, what kind of crap storm's coming at us? And, are we going to have a major attack on the 4th of July? I'm looking up at my screen up here. And I would tend to say no. And let's hope that's correct. Though I will say we have got a lot of things brewing here, and I've been mentioning that in the last podcast. This is kind of simmering to a lot of powerful aspects that are happening in the middle of this month towards the latter part of this month. The moon today, just as of July 2nd, just broke what we call the Kalasarpa Yoga, which in plain English means all the planets in the Vedic astrology, or you could say the inner 7 planets, are in between the nodes. And we've got a first quarter moon coming up today, right at about 12:30 this afternoon, right after the noon hour. So that always brings a shift and a change. But, nothing super catastrophic from what I can see here. A lot of interesting developments, though, I will say that. I mean, when you look back at what's been happening, we definitely saw this bill pass, and there was a lot of people happy about it, a lot of people upset about it. I've been hearing a lot of complaints, oh my God, my insurance is going to go up in smoke, so on and so forth. And, I always try and stay away from doctors if I can, but, sometimes they do have their value, and there are some people who really do need insurance. And I got to tell you, the dental stuff is so doggone expensive. I actually go down to Mexico, a little town called El Gadones, which is awesome. I love it. And you can get dental work done down there for literally 10 to 15% on the dollar. And it's amazing. I just had a bunch of crowns done that literally would have cost me $30,000. Down there, I don't think I paid but $2,400. And the work is impeccable. Absolutely impeccable. So I always tell people about that because there's a lot of ways that we can adjust and make ourselves work better. And again, I'm a real fan of, again, like I say, there's nothing wrong with seeing the doctor. They do have good science, but there's a lot of ways we can take care of our health. I always, again, promote reflexology because especially when you can do it yourself, absolutely amazing. I love it. So, yeah, anyways, well, we got Rocky Stucci Jr. on here. He says, when casting a prashna, he says, what planets are most significant to look at via their placements in a prashna chart? He says, does Rahu and Ketu have significance in prashnas as well? That's a great question, Rocky Stucci Jr. And I would tell you what planets become significant are what we call, not to repeat this word, but significators, which is a fancy word that just means the eastern horizon or the ascendant in a chart becomes either the querent or if you're asking a question about health, like a medical astrology chart, it is the patient in question. So what really assigns what planets become significant or important is a better word to say, not to keep using the same word significator. That's what dictates which planet you look at. Now, for people who aren't familiar with astrology, there's divisions called houses. There's 12 houses that go around a chart. And what you got to do is find out what's the person asking about. That's always the most important thing for a interrogation, horary, or prashna astrologer to extract is what is this person really asking and what are the details? Because I get into this a lot. Every day I've got clients asking me questions, and you really want to assess exactly what they're asking. And, it gets very complex when you get into multiple question or when you have multiple individuals involved. Like, here's a good example. I get this a lot. Well, my sister's stealing the estate, right? Well, the sister from the querent is the third house. The estate, though, of the father would be the fifth, you see, because the fifth house is the second from the fourth, which is the father, you see. And you kind of reverse that a little bit when you talk about prashna. See, prashna, you got to bend your mind around because you do use sometimes different houses for mother and father. So you got to really, the key to prashna or interrogation astrology is identifying what the person's asking about, picking your signifactors, and then it's a matter of geometry after that point. Like, here's a good example. We had a great question last week by Kashmir. It was, are Donald Trump and Elon Musk going to get back together? Will there be friendship? In fact, I'm actually going to put that on the screen because this is such a classic interrogation or prashna. And I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to come. I got to look over my thing here and see if I can share the screen. There we go. So this will take me just a second. Entire screen, bing bong. There we go. So I'm going to jump over here to a various program that I use. And you're going to see here, this was the question that was asked last Saturday. And you're going to notice something that I use both tropical and I use both sidereal. And it's quite interesting here. We'll use the tropical one because it's, it just happens to be up. And you're going to see here on the screen, the eastern horizon, in this case, would have been the querent. Okay, but see, we're not asking about just a seventh house issue. We're also asking about the president. So the president becomes the 10th house. He, in terms of his functionality as a president, the 10th house is the president. And notice, what is that? That's Cancer. And where is Cancer? Well, it's over here. And what's it doing? It's separating from Jupiter. And they all were warm and fuzzy before, right? With Doge and all that. And notice where the moon is going, to a conjunction of Mars. Not a good omen. So, and of course, what just happened, this bill just passed in the Senate. It's now literally, as we speak, sitting in the House. I don't know if they've finished voting on it or not, but it's probably going to pass the House. And the whole bill goes into play. And everybody's freaking out, because they're worried about, oh my God, my money's going to be gone. I actually think, I agree with both Trump and Elon Musk. Elon Musk, like I said, has seen the incredible insanity that probably goes on in the political financial mayhem of Washington, D.C., also known as the District of Criminals. And the problem is, he's probably saying, well, wait a minute, I couldn't run my business like this. This is insane. Here, let me get back out of screen sharing here. And, Trump is again saying, hey, we've got to get the tax breaks in. So at least everybody is in 68% tax height. And yeah, there's a lot of waste and cutting and so on and so forth. Some people are going to be happy. Some people are going to be sad, but you got to remember, we are at a point in this country where we just went through a Pluto return. We just went through a Neptune square Mars. And the Pluto return on this country was the flooding of the borders. It was the looting of the treasury. And it was the bureaucracy that was created. And I got to tell you, I've been saying on podcasts repeatedly, and I hope that this is actually correct, that this spring equinox and also Trump's inauguration chart really shows we are actually going to see, instead of a bunch of newscasters complaining about who did what wrong, like Fauci and all the other stuff with COVID, we're actually going to see some prosecutions. In fact, what's really interesting is RFK was just on a Tucker Carlson podcast, which was really good. I watched it. And RFK basically said, Fauci's guilty. Fauci's guilty. He funded the gain of function research. He funded all this stuff, and he knew damn well what was going on. And I'll go down the rabbit hole a little more. I'll step out on a limb and say, I think this was allowed to happen because this wasn't about Joe Biden. This was about a new one world order takeover. That actually didn't work. It blew up in their faces when Donald Trump got back in. And whether you like Trump or hate Trump or whatever mind control station we all listen to, right? I could tell you the astrology shows this country, even though not everything isn't perfect and some people are going to be unhappy, we are heading in the right direction. There is a corrective turn going on right now based on the astrology. And I'm going off of what we call primary directions on the United States birth chart, which, by the way, is the United States 249th birthday this Friday. So very, very powerful energy. And I see that things are going to correct, even though it's not going to be perfect. But I think we're going to see these tariffs and, more importantly, the releasements of probably close to $150 trillion of resources that have been capped off in this country since the middle 1800s start to be accessed, which will create incredible wealth for this country, incredible wealth. The United States is really blessed. It really is in so many ways. And I think part of it is, we definitely are the de facto, currency reference. And of course, we, literally printing our money can flow over to the rest of the world and has with all the treasury bonds and all this stuff. And it's actually really quite an incredible financial machine when you look at it all. I'm surprised it even functions. I've had people telling me for 50, 60 years, Jeff, there's no way this can keep going. And it keeps going. We keep printing more money. We keep the systems going. We keep funding the largest military in the world. And the rest of it goes out to all these other places. I think what we're seeing right now is a shift that is colossal. And I'm not so sure it's just Trump. I think there's many people behind him who've literally said, we are at a collision course point in this country's evolution. And in order to continue, we need to do recorrection courses, which is, I think, these trusts being opened up with all these precious and rare minerals in the Western United States, the energies being opened up, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really, I think a key element here that's going on. So again, I was really impressed with RFK mentioning, he basically indicted, in a podcast that Fauci's guilty. And he's talking about a truth council, so on and so forth. But here's the thing, and this parallels the astrology that I'm seeing. Remember I said the spring equinox chart and Trump's inauguration chart, the astrology on that shows you're going to see a crap storm par excellence start in this country this fall. In fact, this might be what some of the issues are in this lineup that I see coming up in July, which is the Mars K2 conjunction, which is all happening. I think that's happening right here on, July 21st. So we've got some powerful energies lining up. We got the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And the other thing is the Jill Biden, or should I say Joe Biden, auto pen thing that's going on in Congress. That's no small deal. And you got to remember, we've got a prosecutor in the DOJ, Pam Bondi, and also Kash Patel, who are actually going to do something. So, and this stuff is, I've been around legal stuff. I used to do forensics work, and I certainly wasn't, doing the legal work itself, but I got to see the legal process and how incredibly complex and proceduralized it is. I used to do voice print analysis and acoustical analysis on trials. And I got to tell you, it is a literal quilt work of legal procedures. And in order to prosecute these people, especially as slick as they are, it's not easy to do. But this whole auto pen thing could come unglued if they actually can prove that Biden didn't approve what auto pen signatures were doing. And they're also finding that the Jill Biden signature more matches the auto pen than Joe Biden's. Well, here we go. And if those pardons fall apart, guess what? I'd be packing my bags if I was one of those folks. And, you've got Hunter, you got Fauci, you got a colossal amount of people in the District of Criminals who would not be pardoned. And, RFK actually mentioned that on Tucker Carlson. He said, he's untouchable right now unless we get a truth council. But if those, again, pardons fall apart, big deal. So a lot of stuff. So a lot of stuff going on here. So anyways, I'm reading the comments here. Yeah, everybody's saying here, Fauci, is going to an awful place. Yeah, I hope there's a special place in hell for Fauci, huh? Barefaced liar is what we used to call them. They just look right in the camera and lie to you. And we all know that, this whole situation, and of course we can throw Gruesome in there too, right, out here in California, who probably stuffed billions in his back pocket or millions for sure on these backdoor deals with all the masks. It's actually incredible when you look at what happened to us, and that happened astrologically on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And again, when I go back through history and I look at these major events, the world wars, the calamities, the pandemics, etc., or major shifts in society, we clearly see the astrology lining up. And I got to tell you, the Saturn Pluto absolutely has been right on. 9/11 happened. You could have set your watch to it right when 9/11 happened, and the buildings came down like sparklers from jet fuel. I won't go any more farther than that. And then, but the bottom line is what do we see? COVID broke out exactly. The news, sounded the bullhorn right exactly when Saturn Pluto conjunct, and right on 220 we had the Saturn Jupiter conjunction, which is ushering us into a very high-tech society. And again, we've had technology around for a long time, but now aren't we seeing it? AI is like the buzzword everywhere. And I don't think it's just going to be AI. We're going to see things accelerate like we've never seen before. It's going to be like the Jetsons, as I always say. So, and by the way, I said I was going to put this up, and I want to show you this. This is the book on Cloward Piven strategy. Actually, Camille brought this to my attention. And this is, I think his name was, I don't know what it is here. I got the other thing here. Yeah, it was, this was somebody's post here I'm putting up, but it was Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven. And I don't know if we all want to read this book, but I'll give you the short story and save you the read. This is basically a set of, socialistic authors who basically put out this book. And you can see right up here, there's three major things that I'd mentioned before. The first thing you want to do to destroy capitalism is overwhelm the government with red tape and bureaucracy. The second thing you want to do is amass the national debt to an unpayable status. George Washington called that loot the treasury, right? Which is what they did. And then, of course, the unfettered mass immigration, which just literally destroys the fabric of the country. So for, what it's worth, I got news for you. That sounds like, does that sound familiar? I guess I should ask, because it's exactly what's happened. And, a lot of people are upset about what's happening, but I got to tell you, this country is absolutely worth saving. Again, I always mention, when I go somewhere else and I come back, go to Mexico, go to some other country and come back here, you can feel it. And even though they've tried to destroy it, they haven't. And we have free will here. And again, I talked to many people who have come out of communistic countries from all over the place, Europe, Russia, Tehran, etc., and China, and they all say, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like to have the government tell you where to live, tell you what to eat, tell you what to do for a living. And there's one lady, they whole families living in just little teeny tiny. It's like the actors in Hollywood. They're just living in one little teeny tiny, apartment, and it's horrible. So they're packed in like sardines, and they're told what to do, and they're only given a stipend to live on. Do you want to live that way? I mean, I don't. I think America's one of the greatest countries that's ever existed, and I still, hats off to the founding fathers, because it's clearly a place. The 4th of July celebration is great. I think it's a little loud for me, but the bottom line is, it is an incredible country. And again, the esoteric symbolism I always mention in this country was stunning. Again, I call this to people's attention. If you haven't seen this, look at the symbolism. These are the sacred symbols that are in the United States. The 72, and then the capstone above it, the 72 bricks here. And of course, you've got the 13 arrows and 13 laurel leaves. If you pick this apart, this is actually out of Manly P. Hall's book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And Manly P. Hall, I actually got a chance to meet him. This was way back in the 80s. And I liked him. He was a very stoic, very focused guy. And he was a 33-degree Mason. And I know some people say, oh, the Masons are evil. Well, if you read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, those Masons weren't evil. I can tell you that. They were all right, because, again, I always say, get yourself a copy of the Constitution. It's like $7 or $8, And another book that's really good is this one, the U.S. Constitution and all the other writings. And, it's absolutely phenomenal, the intelligence these people had. And, I think the coffee was better and the air was cleaner, or the food was better, because you think about how they constructed this. And again, it was this back then. You weren't doing this. You didn't have word processors or speech to text and all that stuff. These people were quill penning this stuff, and even to get a piece of paper back then was a lot of work, to process. And, our modern society has shifted so much. And, it's quite incredible what they penned and wrote, and most importantly, understood about human nature. And again, this country isn't perfect. It's certainly had a lot of criminals bend the rules all over the place. But on the other hand, its core constitutional constructs and the Bill of Rights, incredible. Absolutely incredible. You can be any color, any race, any creed, doesn't matter what you believe, you have freedom. And that is something that's magical. And that's something we're celebrating. And I got to tell you, I'm glad I am an American, because it definitely is a place where, your children can at least have an opportunity. And I think what's happening right now with this country, whether you love Trump or hate him, I think again, changes that I see in the astrology shows the crap storm's over and we're moving in better directions. Even though we're going to have our ups and downs, we always get, calamities. That's life. The life is a roller coaster ride. But in general, I think we're on the right track, and I'm very, very excited about it. And let's hope my analysis of the astrology is right. People are saying here, yes, we're very lucky. We are very lucky. You think about it. My father had bought a cabin in the north woods of Wisconsin. And it was back in the 60s. I remember we moved up there. It was a log cabin. It actually had a hand pump. I felt like I was on Little House on the Prairie. It had a hand pump in the kitchen. And I thought, well, geez, does this place have sewers? I walk outside and the pipe's running out into the yard. So in other words, you wash your dishes and just run right out in the yard. And this was purportedly built back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it was literally a log cabin with, this felt with tar on it, chinked in between this. And it was a dirt floor with a fireplace. And I went, wow, this is how people really used to live. And then what really struck me was when I had to go to the bathroom, it was like 10 below and I had to go outside and the outhouse doors froze. You got to kick it open, Yeah, you really appreciate the modern elements of society. And again, when you look at America's infrastructure, it's power grids, the gasoline we don't appreciate that we just pump anytime we want. And you look at the water systems, even though I know they got fluoride in it, but hopefully RFK will get that out. It's really quite incredible. Our road systems, even out here in California, they could repair them a little bit better. But yeah, it's really, really an incredible country when you look at it all. So anyways, I'm going back on, and somebody's mentioning here about Madison's writings are the backbone of this country. You bet. It's really interesting. Certain select individuals contributed so much to the founding documents, which again was a Declaration of Independence, but most importantly, the Bill of Rights and all the amendments, which were incredible. And when you think about all of that, and really an incredible feat to create a country that can survive almost 250 years now of insanity. And we've had some real characters running this country, and we've had some real ups and downs. My grandmother reminded me of the Great Depression. She was born in 1907, and she said, she remembers World War I. In fact, when I was a little kid, my grandfather, I saw these this pointed spike hat and gas masks. I said, what's all this from? He said, well, he was in World War I. He never got deployed because the war ended right as he was ready to go to Europe, which was lucky for him. But, you think back of all the stuff we've been through, and the Great Depression was really, really rough. And again, we can thank the bankers for that one, it sounds like. But in 1929, my grandmother said, you wouldn't believe it. She goes, the only reason we survived is because my grandfather worked at the post office. So he became head postmaster after a while. And that's the reason they had the government money coming in to survive. But she said it was horrible. People lost their homes. They were destitute, couldn't eat. So we're really blessed. And even though this bill passing is a bit of a crunch for some, I think, again, you got to keep the train moving and, throw the rotten apples out as you go down the track, because we're very blessed to be where we're at. So anyways, I'm just reading some more of the comments, and some person here saying, I have noticed that lots of folks are getting more conscious for their health since the scamdemic, knowing the Rockefellers changed the pharma. Yeah, you bet. I mean, I personally am just such a fan of apothecary. I just love herbs. I think they're wonderful. The only thing you got to watch with herbs, if you're on pharmaceuticals, definitely don't go on some herbal regimen unless you check with the doctor or a pharmacist that you don't have conflict, because herbs and pharmaceuticals, they don't mix too well sometimes. So that can be dangerous, but I love herbs. I really do. And I'm not on any pharmaceuticals, but I have to say it has been some miraculous stuff. Cleansing the kidneys, the livers. You can just do so much with herbs. You gotta be knowledgeable about them, but they're really great. And of course, that's the cornerstone of Ayurveda. And I love Ayurvedic astrology. Ayurveda is analyzing imbalances in your chart. And you'll also find as transits or progressions go on, this changes, And, I have to say, there are some things that Western medicine and pharma has put out that has really saved lives. And, so you can't throw any one thing, to the side, because I find there are some pharmaceuticals that really do help people. But there's also apothecary or herbs that are amazing. So anyways, a lot of people are coming through here. I don't have a lot of time this morning. I got to keep this pretty short, but I do want to say we are heading towards a Saturn Neptune conjunction on the 16th of July. And this is a weird one because Saturn not only is it only comes within 12 minutes of arc. And then you've got Neptune just went retrograde. I think Neptune is going retrograde on the 4th, on July 4th. Neptune starts to go backwards. And then following on its heels, Saturn comes up and just about conjuncts the Neptune, which people say, well, what does that mean? Reality dissolving. It's a weird energy. It's very strange, and you can feel it. It's kind of a weird. See, Saturn always rules structures of society. It rules solid reality structures and karmas. And when it hits Neptune, things get squirrely. Neptune is a very strange planet. A lot of astrologers say, oh, it's spiritual and it's love and light, which it can be. But I find it usually errs more to the side of confusion and delusion. So that's all happening. And again, Neptune retrogrades right on July 4th. And then Saturn comes along and makes the conjunction right about July 16th, but only within 12 minutes of arc. And then Saturn goes retrograde. And of course, we got Mercury going to go retrograde on the 17th of July. And Saturn goes retrograde. I'm sorry, on the 12th, not the 16th, but the conjunction slides together right on the 16th. So it's a relay race up there. When you look at astrology, quote unquote, it really is astronomy. That's what it is. It's I believe that they're in interactive portals on all of our souls, which is really, really cool. So anyways, I do have to run here because I've got an appointment, so I can only stay about a half an hour today. But yeah, there's a lot of people are talking all kinds of stuff here. Yeah, someone says I have Saturn conjunct Neptune in my natal chart, right? So that's interesting because, and that's a good thing this person's bringing up, because you'll find that these configurations that I'm all talking about and all these astrologers are talking about will interact with each one of us uniquely, completely uniquely. And that is the transits and progressions that are going on in your birth chart and also the dashas. So we're all like tuning forks that resonate at different frequencies, and usually multiple ones. And it's very complex. But when these configurations line up, some people does nothing. They just keep right on going, right? Why? It doesn't resonate with them. It's not aspecting anything in the chart, which is like a resonance. And really interesting. But the people that it does, it's going to have a huge effect depending on how that configuration lines up. So it's a really, really interesting stuff. And I have to say that we're all fine-tuned to the energy we get. Somebody's asking how they can get in contact with me. The easiest way is jeff@jeffharmon.com. And one other thing I got to tell you about here. This is fun. I always mention this to people. I say, well, I got to go because I got to go calculate an angel. And this is, I do angels on pendants. This is my math that I have to fill out when I calculate an angel on a pendant. Here, let me show you this. Let me see if I can get this to work here. So these are pendants that I make. You can see these are the guardian angel. And, this is Aramaic. And if it's they're going by fast, but there's 7 letters followed by the Aleph Lamed on the far upper left of the pendant. So you can see it there. And what this is, and this is the cool thing, and I want to close with this, is that literally the zodiac, or you could say the celestial heavens, these are all different pendants I've done. I've done so many of these over the years. And you can see that's the angel that's engraved on there. Well, what's interesting, and this gets into spirit and matter, the eastern horizon in your birth chart, just like in a prashna or horary, is where spirit concretizes. And if you think about interrogation astrology, horary or prashna, whichever one you want to call it, the eastern horizon is taken as the reference point. Just like in your birth chart, the eastern horizon is measured right where the longitude and latitude of where you came out of mom's womb and drew first breath. That concretizes or solidifies the celestial imprint from that place in time. You got to remember, time is also relative to place. So what's so interesting about these angels I was just talking about is I have to calculate the eastern horizon's position to where all the rest of the 7 inner planets from Saturn in are. And you take that degree and you expunge 22, because there's 22 Aramaic letters in the Hebrew Aramaic alphabet. And you come up with a letter. And then once you get all the planets' letters, then I have to arrange them in what we call zodiacal power or dignity, which is a fancy word for who's strongest and weakest by what we call placement in the zodiac, as well as what we call accidental dignity, meaning if they're on an angle, meaning noon, sunrise, noon, sunset, or midnight, or if they're in good houses aspecting the ascendant, those get more power. So there's all kinds of measurement tools to do that. And that's what I do. I write it all out like this. It takes me a long time, but it takes me a good hour. And then then I make a diagram, and then we engrave it onto the pendant. But the coolest thing, and I'll close with this, is the gematria. This is where I always say we may have lost a lot of things with the Vulgate translations in the Western documents called the Bible, because the original Aramaic, Hebrew, and Coptic and Greek actually had codes and ciphers in them that would literally relate to the soul. And there's things that I give people, like someone will say, wow, I was a bricklayer, or I'm from this tribe, or I'm the son or daughter of this king. And these are all things referenced in the ancient biblical texts that are stunning. And many people may know that as something called gematria. Gematria is a word that means numerology, and there's correspondences to your soul in your birth chart, which is stunning. And now we get into, I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus. This is the true matrix of the soul. And I give these people these sheets that are printed on really nice paper that tell you the numerology and correspondences of your birth chart's planetary placements to the gematria of the soul, which is really cool. And there's a lot down the rabbit hole on that one. And we only know this much compared to infinity. The soul's journey on this planet is very stunning. It really is. We are all literally spiritual beings having a physical experience. And I love that ancient astrology, because you can't get that in sun sign astrology. I'm a Pisces, I'm an Aries. And then you can actually get, again, like I said, the gematria. Again, you can see here these letters. It's absolutely amazing. By the way, what you're seeing on the top there, that's the 4 archangels that were surrounding on that one pendant. Here, I'll start that again. You'll see some of these actually have those 4 letters on top, around that top gem, around that emerald up there. That's Archangel Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Oriel, which are the 4, you could say, letters of divinity or God's name in the physical realms, which means earth, air, fire, and water, which is really cool, because even though all the physicists kind of laugh at all this stuff, I got to tell you, every substance on this planet can be broken down into the categories of earth, air, fire, and water, which is very, very interesting stuff. With that, I gotta leave you, or I'm going to be late for my next appointment. But everybody, thanks for joining me. And again, I should also mention there is numerology and gematria as well in the Sanskrit, Tamil, and Dravidian. But I don't know how to do that. I just know how to do the Aramaic. So it's really cool and very interesting stuff. So anyways, you all have a great 4th of July, and I will talk to you on Sunday. Many blessings to everybody, and stay safe. So here we go.